And to help us break it all down, let's bring on Michael Collins, covers the NCAA landscape for FanSided. Michael, can you hear us first off?
I can hear you.
All right, all good.
Nice, yes.
First off, LSU, Oklahoma, a testament to how great LSU is or how awful Oklahoma could be?
I think it's definitely a testament to how good LSU is. I wouldn't say Oklahoma is awful, but they definitely have shown in their past appearances in this one that they've got a lot of work to be done on defense. LSU is doing things that we haven't seen college football teams do in a long time, and they've got a lot of pro talent on this team. Joe Burrow has been absolutely fantastic. So I just think that they're just a step above everybody else. But Oklahoma's a great team, but they're not awful. But they've got a lot of work to do defensively.
How do you explain Joe Burrow's transformation just this year into the likely #1 pick?
I think that it's the old round peg in a square hole. I think in the past, I think at Ohio State and last year at LSU, you had them trying to kind of mold him to what their system was. And when they brought in Joe Brady, and Joe Brady saw what he could do and what his capabilities were and what his strengths were, he molded an offense around his quarterback. Joe Burrow is not the kind of guy that's going to win games for you and that can carry the team if you have him drop back 3 steps and put the ball in someone's gut. He's a guy that's going to throw the ball and stretch the field for you. And once they spread out that offense and really started utilizing their wide receivers and utilizing the speed they had, he blossomed.
Yeah, and it really is one of the great stories. We saw the graphics over and over on the broadcast of like, here's Burrow's stock. It's risen from this to this. And kind of on that same tangent, Ed Orgeron, I mean, summing up his story, Michael, his journey from assistant to, one of the top coaches in the sport.
I think one of Ed Orgeron's greatest strengths is knowing what his weaknesses are. And that's something he's learned through his journey being an assistant and in his head coaching opportunities. And I think this year is a perfect example of that. I think he knew that they needed to make some wholesale changes in offense, that he had to come away from the traditional LSU pound 'em, ground 'em offense. And he knew that he wasn't the guy to do that. And he brought in the people who could do it for him. And that's the sign of a great coach that can recognize his own shortcomings, but knows how to find people that can do it for him. And I think that's one of Ed Orgeron's greatest strengths, that and the fact that he's just such a likable guy and his players love playing for him. And I think as that's been brought along and the fact that he's such a good motivator, that has turned him into one of the best coaches in football.
Now, Mike, that Ohio State-Clemson game is one of the best playoff games of the college football era, the college football playoff era, that is, the short history that it's had. But in that game, what did you learn about Clemson? We could talk about them since they came out on top, even though Ohio State, they don't have to hang their head at all either in that loss.
No, both teams played an excellent game. And I think the biggest takeaway I had from that game was how Brent Venables was able to adjust in game on the fly. I mean, his defense looked overmatched. Mm-hmm. They looked like they didn't know exactly what was going on. There were missed assignments, there were missed tackles, and Venables was able to get in there and make some adjustments and all of a sudden just shut Ohio State down. And for my money, he's probably the best defensive coordinator in the country right now. And I think he's the biggest reason why Clemson came out on top of that game, because otherwise we were looking at another rout.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It looked that way. It looked ugly at first, and then the way that they were able to settle in, and also Trevor Lawrence was an enormous part of that comeback. So Burrow and Lawrence, Michael, I mean, this is the best quarterback matchup in the national championship since when for you?
I think if you're going to go back and look at, great quarterback matchups in the national championship game, you could look at, go back to 1999, Chris Winkie and Michael Vick was a good one. 2013, Jameis Winston, Nick Marshall was a good one. There you had 2 quarterbacks with very similar styles. But if you want to talk about a quarterback matchup with 2 guys who could really change the face of the game and take over a game, you got to go to that 2006 Rose Bowl with Matt Leinart and Vince Young. I think that's probably one of the greatest quarterback matchups we've seen in a national championship game. And I think this one may be on that level with these 2 guys, if not better. depending on how things pan out. Both of these guys, Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow, have the ability to change the game with their legs and with their arm, and can put a team on their shoulders. And you don't see that often. And here you got two guys who can do it.
Now, what are your initial thoughts on the matchup on paper, at least, when these two square off in a couple weeks in New Orleans?
Boy, that's putting me on the spot. You got strength against strength for sure. Clemson's defense has been great pretty much all season, and it's going against arguably the best offense in college football right now. Something's got to give. I think I got to give a little bit of an edge to LSU in this one. I mean, LSU faced Georgia and Florida, arguably two of the best defenses in college football this year, who pretty much stopped everybody, and LSU was still able to do pretty much whatever they wanted against those two teams. So I think you got to give the edge to LSU. But, Trevor Lawrence is one of those guys who makes things happen. And, again, Brent Venables is a guy, if there's anybody who can figure out how to stop Joe Burrow, how to stop these receivers, Venables may be the guy. So it's going to be a great game. I still have to give the edge to LSU in my book, though.
Yeah, certainly a complete team in what they're able to do and have so many weapons. I want to open up a larger conversation, though, Michael, about playoff expansion, because there has been a lot of talk and a lot of debate, and here we are at those, that time where you get to the 4, and then you have all these teams thinking like, okay, well, we should be in. We they should be expanded to 8. Your thoughts on the format? Do you anticipate any changes down the line, or how's that conversation going to be picking up steam?
I think inevitably you're going to have changes coming. I think a lot of the fans want it. I think you're going to get enough pressure from coaches and commissioners in different conferences that want it. Personally, I don't think we need it. I like the format the way it is. I like the exclusivity. I like the fact that it's hard to get in. I like the fact that we're talking about it from practically the beginning of the season to the to the end. It's different than any other sport. I wouldn't mind seeing a play-in game. I wouldn't mind seeing your 3 top teams, because arguably you've had one team every playoff that's been like, well, were they the right team to come in there? So, maybe you picked 3 top teams and the committee said, okay, we got these 3 teams and here's 2 teams that are going to do a play-in game for that 4th spot. And that kind of gives you a little more inclusion. You could play it the week in between when the playoff starts. You can schedule it around however you want it. I think that might help out a little. That certainly would have helped out UCF a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. This year, I don't know that it would have helped. I think this year you've got 3 elite teams and a bunch of kind of pretty good teams below them. I don't think it would have mattered who played LSU the other day, actually. But I really don't want to see it to expand to 8. We have a hard enough time coming up with 4 teams that give us 2 competitive games. We've had blowouts every year in the playoff. If you expand that to 8, how many bad games are you going to end up seeing?
Exactly.
Right. Now, Tua Tagovailoa, what do you think he does? How does he move forward? And what's his health like right now?
Tua's in a tough spot. He's still, it's 6 weeks past his injury, and he's still not weight-bearing, last I heard. And that's not a good sign. He's definitely still a top NFL prospect. I don't know that it's worth it for him to come back to Alabama. I think the question right now is he going to make a full comeback from this injury? Is this one of those injuries that's just going to debilitate him and continue to get worse? Nobody's really talking about it right now. But you would think 6 weeks after the injury that he would be a little further along than he is, and we're not seeing much. I think he's going to go into the draft, and I think obviously some team is going to take a chance on him, because if he comes back, full strength, he can be a franchise changer for an NFL team. But I think coming back to play another year of college, he's got nothing left to prove. He's done everything he can do in college. He needs, to be fine-tuned and coached by some NFL coaches, and hopefully he can make a comeback, because he's a great kid. He's a great quarterback. He would be a great face of the franchise for any team that took him.
Michael Collins covers the entire college football landscape. He is our go-to guy for NCAA football. Thank you so much for breaking everything down. We look ahead to what's going to be a fantastic national championship. Thank you so much, Michael. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.